In the wake of the storm of blackmail and bullying allegations against the government, former Tory MP Rory Stewart, who stood against Johnson for leader of the party, had these strong words.
This is all part of the same system, which is that in the end, what's been built are these machines which are about winning and loyalty. And the whips will do all they can to try to defend the Prime Minister. And it's a very ruthless, often humiliating process where MPs who may have come from ordinary life, they may have been people who in previous lives were journalists or business people or army officers, they end up in Parliament and they are put through this extraordinary hazing process of which the whips are part, of trying to enforce loyalty to the leader. And this, I think, is dangerous because it takes away from the question of people voting with their consciences and trying as best they can to work out what's best for the country. And I think that's happening here again now. My experience of whips is that the British system is very much set up. It's a sort of elective dictatorship. A prime minister comes in, doesn't matter whether it's Tony Blair or Gordon Brown or David Cameron or Theresa May or Boris Johnson. And the whip's job is to deliver their will and their manifesto. And they will do it largely by using promotion. One of the problems in British government is that the reason that people often become ministers or don't become ministers is not on the basis of their knowledge or their skill at doing a job. It's based on their loyalty, whether or not they do what the whips want. Now, that's fine for getting the government business through, and there's an argument for that. People want to get government business through effectively, but it does mean that you end up with ministers who are often not very well suited for the jobs that they're occupying.
Aaron, Rory Stewart there is talking about some of the flaws in Britain's electoral system that you sometimes talk about, that you seem interested in. Are you on the same page as him on this? Is he right that the system as we currently have it makes Britain an elected dictatorship?
Yeah, that was a term first used by Lord Hailsham, I think, in 86 or something like that, the mid-1980s, referring to the Margaret Thatcher premiership, which was to say, because of our political system, our electoral system, our political system, you vote for a political party, the party with the most seats in Parliament, has a prime minister at its apex. And that prime minister effectively has presidential, quasi-presidential powers. Now in the US, those powers are checked by independent judiciary. We kind of have that here, more so in recent years, but not like the US. And of course, you have separation of powers. You have Congress. A bit different presidential system, of course, in France. Quite distinct to what we have here, which is a parliamentary system. The problem with our parliamentary system in the last several decades is more and more power is concentrated in the person of the prime minister. And that's where we talk about an elective dictatorship, whether that's in the cabinet or with the prime minister, under a certain set of conditions, which is they have a large majority. So you could say Tony Blair, 97 to 2005, elective dictatorship. Like I say, the term really was generated in response to Thatcher in the 80s. Similar with now, Boris, majority of 80. I mean, I think those are the same sort of conditions. So initially, those words were used in regard to our political system, where we don't have a separation of powers. I don't want to talk about separation of powers and whether or not that's a good thing. You could say in the British system, it means that governments can enact decisive change, like the NHS after 1945, like Margaret Thatcher's sort of privatization and market-oriented solutions in the 80s, like getting quote-unquote Brexit done. So it does have some advantages, some disadvantages are you are giving the government of the day extraordinary power and very few ways of inhibiting them. I mean, we saw one, this week, which is of course the House of Lords with the policing bill, but ultimately that's not particularly robust. Now, Rory Stewart's saying that alongside, we need electoral reform, or we need to change the kinds of people in politics and get to the top of politics, ones that aren't based on loyalty and backing up a political project like Boris Johnson to the hilt, despite breaking any manner of principles and political sort of ideals they professed previously to hold. I think it's dangerous to say that's a dictatorship. I don't think it's a dictatorship. I think it's just dysfunctional Westminster politics. And like I say, I think that's the future of first past the post. So I think you've got separate criticisms going on here. I think, we don't have sufficient checks and balances. You can say that's not really democratic. I get that. Particularly when, you can have a 60% turnout. One of the parties gets mid-40s of that 60%, and yet they can do what the hell they like. I mean, I think that's more of a sort of dictatorial state of affairs than the fact you have a disciplinarian, vindictive, often malicious whipping operation underpinning both parties. So I wouldn't call it a dictatorship. No, I think if you're going to use that word in regards to aspects of the British system, it applies, I think, arguably, but not here. I just think this is a 19th century way of doing politics, backroom dealings, intimidation, which in the 21st century no longer works.